What's up, guys, and welcome to the weekly Q&A. Real quick before questions, we have to say thank you to our newest Jedi Master patron, Good Luck Turret. Thank you so much for your support, Good Luck Turret. Whatever your real name is, it means the world to us.
Yes, thank you. Daniel Bowen asks if Anakin is the only chosen one, or if the mantle could be passed on to future generations.
I think that, yes, the mantle is passed on. I think that there were multiple chosen ones over multiple generations, kind of like Neo in The Matrix, where, he wasn't the only one. I would refer to them more as vessels, because in the Darth Vader comic, Jocasta Nu says the Force finds its vessels, it always does. So I think that Anakin and Luke and Rey are all vessels for the Force, or chosen ones to a degree. Even Luke refers to himself and Rey as chosen ones in the Last Jedi novelization. I do think Anakin was a bit of a special case because he did have this one very specific destiny of the prophecy, and he brought about the end of the Sith. And I think Luke and Rey also have very specific destinies. It's just that maybe there weren't prophecies written down about them.
Yeah, we don't know that much about the prophecy that we're speaking about, but I know George Lucas has gone on the record saying that technically Anakin was the chosen one, and I think the Mortis arc from the Clone Wars kind of proves that a little bit. But yeah, I agree. I think the prophecy is something that could be repeating itself, kind of like history always repeats itself.
All of this has happened before, and all of it will happen again.
Yeah, it's an ongoing fight against not only the Sith, but just evil and darkness.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Reptar117 wants to know if the droid Roger's inclusion of the new droidography book makes the Freemaker Adventures canon, or is it still a gray area?
I would still say it's in a gray area. The way that people have described the Freemaker Adventures and where it exists in canon is that it's similar to the Lego games, where they are adaptations of things that actually happened, but they're silly adaptations. They've got a more childlike sense of humor to them and all that. And having watched Freemaker Adventures, yeah, I would say that that's accurate. I think that the Freemaker family probably existed, and some of the stuff that they did in the show probably happened, but not exactly the way it was depicted. So yeah, I do think that Roger probably is some droid that really existed in the universe.
I was really happy to see his inclusion in that book, because that can open up so many doors of including other characters from that show into future canon stories. I know we see Lando in the Freemaker's Adventures in one episode. He's only there to get to retrieve his cape.
Yeah.
But it was really cool to see him in an episode, and he's also in a little short YouTube video that is part of the Freemaker Adventures, I think.
Yeah, it was it was released on Lego's YouTube channel or something, but it was an official video. And yeah, I would say that kind of Roger's inclusion here, yeah, I think that opens up doors and kind of legitimizes those Lego shorts or anything that Lego puts out. It's yeah, I would still say that it is an adaptation. It didn't necessarily happen that exact way in canon, but it probably is something that did happen in canon to a degree.
Yeah, and so the short is basically, we see Lando in Maz's castle, so we know that Lando and Maz potentially know each other. That could open up some doors for episode 9.
Sure.
And Lando's role in the future of this saga.
Yeah.
Jedi Knight Porg McPorgeson asks what alien species from other properties could appear in Star Wars like E.T. did in The Phantom Menace.
Right. That's a fun little cameo. You can see E.T.'s species in the Senate. So, of course, they were included because E.T. was made by Spielberg. Spielberg and Lucas are close friends. So I kind of went along with those lines and thought that other Spielberg properties maybe could happen. So my first thought was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but the Kaminoans were kind of already based on them. So then I was like, all right, well, maybe the aliens from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But they're kind of like so generic. But I guess those would be my two options, or really just one, because the Kaminoans kind of already fit that bill.
Yeah. The only one I could think of was a Disney connection, and it would be Stitch from Lilo and Stitch.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
They could, I mean, it wouldn't have to be like the exact, I don't know what kind of alien he is, but like some sort of alien that looks like him in the background somewhere.
I like that, actually.
Vando Wilrisian wants to know what elements of the Clone Wars that were never finished do we want to see, and maybe a character or concept we wish had appeared.
I mean, the Siege of Mandalore, once they told us about that, is the only thing that I want. Even if it's in a book or a comic, even though we know kind of the whole emotional story, I really want to see it. Hey guys, I'm going to pause this Q&A real quick because, as you might have realized by now, we recorded this before the San Diego Comic-Con Clone Wars panel that happened on Thursday. That was kind of silly of us, especially since I chose this question. I thought it was an interesting one. Didn't even occur to me that, oh yeah, there's a panel where something might happen. Something totally did happen. And it looks like we're going to see the Siege of Mandalore on screen. In the Q&A, I'm about to talk about what happens in the Siege of Mandalore, and if you don't want spoilers, I would recommend skipping them. If you have no idea what the Siege of Mandalore is about, what's going to happen, just skip to the time code that I have posted on the screen, and you will be fine. But yeah, that was a pretty exciting day, and I got my wish. I wanted to see the Siege of Mandalore in some way, shape, or form, and I'm getting it on the small screen at least, which, I mean, that's ideal. I still can't believe that we're gonna get the Clone Wars back, but that's it. I just wanted to give you that spoiler warning. Now, back to the Q&A. But knowing that Anakin and Ahsoka get some more time together, and that he leaves behind Rex and a bunch of the 501st, and they all have orange paint, and they are marked like Ahsoka, and Anakin gets to tell her how proud he is of her. Like, when Dave Filoni was telling that story at Celebration, and Ashley Eckstein is just crying on stage, I was like, if we could see anything, I would want it to be that. Yeah.
Any other, like, ideas aside from what we know could have happened?
No, pretty much everything that I want to see is stuff that they have mentioned. Like, a concept that they almost did was bringing in the Yuuzhan Vong, kinda, sorta. That was interesting to me to see how they were going to adapt them. I don't think they were going to delve into that too much. It was just like they were going to encounter some extragalactic beings, and yeah, they would resemble the Vong, but a lot of their other characteristics would have been done away with. Like, they would have been connected to the Force, but I don't know. That's all I had.
I had a couple ideas, but I was like, these seem a little bit far-fetched, but at the same time, we got the Mortis arc, and that was pretty crazy and out there. So I don't know if they could have gone into a little bit of Yoda's past, perhaps, like flashbacks, anything like that, which would be tricky because we don't know anything about Yoda's past at all. Also, Padme's kind of like upbringing, a little bit more about her family, maybe.
Yeah, that would have been good since they almost did that in Attack of the Clones. Like, there are deleted scenes where you meet her parents and her sister and her nieces, so it's stuff that was introduced and never really touched upon, so that would have been cool to see it in the Clone Wars.
Yeah. And then I also thought about, more specifically, the science behind the cloning on Kamino. That would have been cool to see a little bit more in depth, and then lastly, I think how lightsabers were made, like a more in-depth episode about seeing the Padawans or the younglings make their lightsabers.
Yeah,
once they get their crystals.
Especially because, like, we now know this character Hu Yang. I kind of hope that, since we know he's like this really ancient old droid, I want them to start exploring ancient old Jedi in the films, and I want him to be there. That would be so cool.
Yeah. Sebastian Pizarro and Dason Flores both read theories about how Luke and Han could potentially be brought back to life in Episode 9 and ask what we think about that.
No.
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 Han definitely won't ever happen, because that's more Harrison Ford. He's been trying to kill Han Solo since Empire Strikes Back, and I am positive that he was like, I will come do Han in Force Awakens if you kill me and I never have to play Han again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he hates Han Solo as a character. I think it was just, he's gone on record as saying that he thinks the biggest service for the character is to die and move things forward emotionally, something along those lines. So I think that he was like, I'm never going to play this character again. I don't think he'll appear in 9 unless they pay him like millions of dollars for a very short cameo.
Yeah.
And it would be like in a hologram or something.
Mm-hmm.
Luke, I still think he's going to be back in Episode 9 as a Force Ghost. I don't think that anyone's... And I think both of these theories involve the world between worlds.
I was going to bring that up because when that happened, everybody was like, oh, time travel's a thing in Star Wars now. That changes everything.
Right.
And that wasn't necessarily the case. So if we start bringing people back from the dead, who knows what could happen after that. It's just going to open a floodgate of problems, I think, for the franchise.
And I don't think that that's the way the world between worlds works. Like, we've talked about this before, but I don't think that Ezra saved Ahsoka's life. I don't think there's another timeline where she was killed. I think that that was the only way that it ever happened, was she was almost killed and Ezra saved her.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever we have seen happened, it happens. There's no changing it. So there's no other timeline where someone goes into the world between worlds and pulls Han away from Kylo Ren.
Yeah, there's no alternate universes,
right?
Nothing like that.
And because that just removes the power of death, and that's already on shaky ground for me because of Darth Maul. And like I've said this over and over, and as much as I love Darth Maul's story after the Phantom Menace, I will always think that bringing him back from being cut in half, it just opens up too many doors for literally anyone's death to not matter. Yeah. And I think that's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah.
That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon, where I left you a written response. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month will get you access to extra Star Wars Explained content like audio commentaries for the films, and the combined donations really go a long way in supporting the channel.
On to YouTube questions. Oliver C. asks how we think JJ will tie all 3 trilogies together in Episode 9.
I'm pretty sure we touched on this last week, but this question had a lot of upvotes, so we'll talk about it again. And the way I keep thinking it'll happen is Force Ghost Convention.
Yeah.
For Ghost Con.
Ghost Con.
I think that Luke, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Yoda, Qui-Gon, I think all of them could appear. I think that would be fantastic and would be a perfect way to thematically draw everything together. But I don't know, is there anything else that we can think of that would kind of bring everything together, all 3 trilogies?
All 3 trilogies? I was actually, when I first read this question, I thought it was just the sequel trilogy, so I was thinking more along the lines of, I really want to see Kylo do some really crazy stuff, like use his dark side power as big as he can. Like, I want to see something big out of him. I don't think he should be redeemed necessarily. I don't really know how I feel about all that, but I do want to see him have like a big moment.
Right.
And same with Rey. And ultimately it comes down to how he ends this episode, and like he has to end it in a way that allows for future content. And
yeah,
so
I think they will leave that door open.
That's going to be tough.
I think it has to do 2 things. Like, I think it has to, be open enough, but I think that also they need to say, we might not ever do more Skywalker Saga movies.
Right.
And I think that, I do think that if he were just to find a way to end the Skywalker line, that could thematically bring everything together, and then those 9 movies would be about Anakin's conception through his final descendant's death, or the end of the Skywalker line, basically.
Well, even if someone were to straight out say, this is the end of the Skywalkers, no one would believe it, because no one believes Kylo when he says Rey's parents are no one.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are people that still think Snoke is alive, and like we just said, like, that potentially yes, because he got cut in half, and people have come back from worse. So it's hard to convince anyone that anything is truly over. Actually, something that I think that they could do to address all 3 trilogies, and they kind of did this in The Last Jedi, and we kind of just brought this up, but it's the Battlestar thing. The cyclical nature of all of this has happened before, all of it will happen again, and someone needs to break that cycle. Especially between the original and sequel trilogies, it's the Empire and the Rebels again. So when Kylo Ren in the middle of the movie is like, it's time to let everything die, I was on board. I was like, oh, he's going to do it. Like, they're going to break the cycle, and it's going to go in this totally new direction, and then it didn't happen, which I was a little bit let down by. But I think that they could address that again, where someone needs to break that cycle so that this doesn't happen again.
I don't know if that cycle can be broken.
It might not be. I mean, it's called Star Wars, so, like, you can't just stop all wars. But
I mean, you gotta have a good versus evil kind of story for the most part.
Sure.
And I think ultimately it also comes down to the Jedi. What happens to the Jedi? Is Rey gonna continue the Jedi Order or something similar? Is she gonna teach new Jedi?
Maybe she'll start a new order called the Skywalkers or something where, like, that's how the Skywalker name continues. But
or it's like not necessarily strictly Jedi training, but just like Force user training, something like that. I think that's an important part of wrapping things up.
Yeah.
Cryptic Element wants to know if we will ever see how Rex, Wolfe, and Gregor removed their inhibitor chips.
It's Star Wars, so it's always possible. It always might be addressed somewhere. I don't think it needs to be. I mean, there are some strange questions. They're like, how did Gregor survive what happened to him, and how did he wind up with Rex and Wolfe? And yeah, there are some weird timeline questions where Rex removed his chip before the Siege of Mandalore, so it didn't go off, and he and Ahsoka fought together, and there's a lot going on that is confusing, but also it's like, I don't think they have to address it. I don't think it's a gap that needs to be filled in. Like, we can just be, oh, yeah, they removed their chips and that's all we need to know. But it's Star Wars. We still might get that story someday.
Yeah, I didn't have an answer for this. I was like, I don't think they would show us, and I don't think it needs to be shown. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Elemental Jedi asks if we could ever see the Skywalkers pop up in Star Wars stories after the main saga ends.
We kind of just talked about that.
Again,
I forgot.
They're never going away.
Probably not. I mean, it's possible. I mean, we had in Legends Cade Skywalker 100 years after all of the original trilogy and everything that happened with Luke, and he's still interacting with Luke's Force Ghost. I mean, Luke's Force Ghost could pop up like way down the line, so they could appear that way. Mm-hmm. There could be some surviving Skywalkers. I guess I think pretty strongly that Kylo is going to be the last of the Skywalker line. And even if he does survive, he's a Solo more than a Skywalker. Like, he could still pass on the name if he's redeemed and if he has kids. But I don't think Luke has secret kids anywhere.
No.
And so, yeah, I kind of think that the Skywalkers are going to end in episode 9. Maybe not. Like, maybe their mantle, kind of like Batman, will be taken on by Rey or something like that. But I don't know. I think that the only way a Skywalker might pop up down the line as a Force ghost or some kind of guiding spirit.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, their question says Star Wars stories.
Right.
So, I mean, there's always books, comics, the Disney streaming service. We could always, even though we've had plenty of Skywalker action, we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
But they could always pop up in a flashback or in a story being told, something like that. I think the legend of the Skywalkers will probably live on and be told in future stories here and there to fill in gaps. But yeah, like I agree. I don't think we're gonna see them.
Well, you kind of bring up something interesting, like a different perspective than I wasn't thinking. I was thinking just chronologically after Episode 9, but what if a Star Wars story took place before Episode 1? Could we see the ancestors of Anakin Skywalker? Maybe he had some old Jedi relatives, or
like before Shmi?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Because, I mean, of course, there was a Skywalker line before Shmi. I think that the Skywalkers rose to prominence when Anakin was conceived through the Force, but there were Skywalkers before him, so yeah, there's potential there.
If we get that Kenobi movie, we could definitely see a young Luke.
Sure.
Trying to use the Force.
So yeah, there are definitely potential stories that could involve Skywalkers that would be released after 9. Chronologically, I don't know.
Yeah. Lily Leola is our savior wants to know how Luke never heard about Anakin on the HoloNet or anything like that.
I think that probably comes down to him being sheltered. I think that Owen and Beru were very protective of him. They didn't want him to be like his father. In the Star Wars comics, we see Owen yelling at Obi-Wan because he's like, you already got my brother killed, you're not coming after my nephew. I think that any mention of Anakin, they probably just tried to keep Luke away from it. But even though Anakin was a hero of the Republic, he was a Jedi, and Imperial propaganda was trying to basically make the galaxy forget about the Jedi, paint them as traitors, and erase them from history. So I don't think there was probably much mention of Anakin or the other Jedi in the HoloNet or the news or anything like that.
Yeah, because everybody whenever it comes up, it's like, oh, the Jedi, like, I thought those were just myths or stories. And But I agree about him living a very sheltered life, being kind of a farm boy, very excited to go to Tashi Station. Yeah, I don't think he's getting much news.
Yeah.
Last up, we've got Sabrina Zaniletti, who asks if we would like to see Thrawn appear in a live-action movie or show.
Yeah, of course. I love Thrawn. I don't think that it's gonna happen in any significant way. This is what I've always said. Maul showing up in Solo kind of changed that, because I would have never expected them to just dump that in there with no warning. But I still think that if Thrawn were to appear, or this goes for a lot of characters, Hera, Zeb, Ahsoka, like, I think that their first introduction to live action, especially a movie, would be a small cameo. Like, even just, like, I feel like Thrawn would be so easy to do if he were just a blue-skinned dude in the background. Like,
but see, I feel like people would be mad at that because he's such an important and cool character to so many people. Him just showing up in the background, that would be the ultimate tease.
Sure. I think that, I at least hope that people would be grateful for that.
Well, I think if they're going to bring him in, maybe give him 1, maybe 2 lines.
Sure.
Give him a little bit of screen time. Because, yeah, my idea was it would be cool because he's such a cool character, but I don't know if they could do his character justice in a live-action format, because it would either have to be like a main character, and then that brings up the possibility of him being killed off, which would suck, or, like you said, being just brought in as a side villain that is kind of like handling things elsewhere, not part of like the main story.
Yeah. I think there are ways to do it without it being too... I can't think of a word besides traumatic. That's not the right word, but too confusing to the casual viewer. Like, yeah, if he just had a line or two and people were just like, oh, what's that blue-skinned Imperial about? Like, I think that would work. That wouldn't be too much. I don't know. I just don't see him having, like, a starring role anytime soon.
Yeah. I could kind of see him having the same amount of screen time as Tarkin in Rogue One. And maybe... I guess if we're going to talk about bringing the Skywalkers back, this would have to be some kind of live-action series set before everything that's happening now, but have him interacting with Vader or interacting with anyone, basically. We still don't know where he is.
I know, it's hard to answer this when he's just kind of out there somewhere.
And we don't really know how long they live, or do we?
I don't know that we do. I think they're kind of standard human. They're near human species, so I think that they probably have similar lifespans.
Mm-hmm. It would be cool if he popped up in episode 9. Just like, hey, what's up? Finally got out of that space ditch.
I don't think they're gonna answer where he's been just all of a sudden like that. I think they're more likely going to answer it, which, who knows, maybe he'll pop up like early in Star Wars Resistance so that he can then appear in episode 9.
That is true. I forgot about Resistance. That would be a good one to go from Rebels to another animated series.
If I had to guess, I think Thrawn and Ezra's fate will be answered in Resistance, just because Filoni tends to, between Rebels and Clone Wars, answer some of those lingering Clone Wars questions. So I think he will continue that and answer some of those Star Wars Rebels questions in Resistance. So if they were to do that rather quickly, then yeah, there might be some room for Thrawn and or even Ezra to show up in episode 9.
As animated characters, though, not live action.
In episode 9? Maybe. It's just like, what's that cartoon doing here? They're like, look, we've been through some stuff.
Yeah, that other dimension or whatever they went to turned them into 2D.
Yeah.
It's like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit territory.
Maybe. What a weird answer. That's all the time we have for questions today. If you have a question for next week's video, just put it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel,
and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.